Getting stuff done with ADHD is hard from start to finish. So far in this series, we've covered both how to get started on a task and how to survive the messy middle of that task, and you can check out those videos up here. But today, we're gonna be talking about the hardest part, for me at least, which is how to actually tie up the loose ends of a task. How are we supposed to actually finish what we start? Hi there, everybody. My name is Megan, and this is the Neurocuriosity Club YouTube channel, the only channel that I'm aware of that's specifically for people who think they might be ADHD, autistic, or both, but they're not totally sure. Let's get curious about our brains together. Okay, first we need to talk about what is it that makes finishing a task so hard for the ADHD brain. I think it's three things: expectations, overwhelm, and demand avoidance. Let's start with expectations. So I think a lot of times starting a task when you have ADHD is so hard, and then not quitting in the middle is so hard that when we get to the end, we're like, okay, this is the end. It should just be one or two final steps and then we're done. But in reality, finishing a task is just as complex as starting one or continuing one. A lot of times we think there's only one or two steps to finishing a task when there's usually more like 15. This leads directly into roadblock number 2, which is overwhelm. The idea of doing another 15 goddamn steps after you have worked so hard just to start and so hard not to quit is so overwhelming. Staring at that finishing to-do list is just too much sometimes. And the third reason that we often struggle to finish tasks is something called demand avoidance. Now, there is a specific profile of autism called the persistent drive for autonomy profile, or sometimes called the pathological demand avoidance profile. And this profile of autism is defined, as it sounds like, by a very extreme avoidance of demands, a very extreme drive to have your own autonomy. And this can look like being very triggered, and I don't mean that in the lighthearted or like boomer kind of sense. I mean literally nervous system triggered by demands and by hierarchies. And when these people say they can't do something because it's a demand, they don't mean I don't wanna, they don't mean it's hard, they mean I can't. And that is its own profile, its own neurotype. That being said, many ADHDers do experience some type of demand avoidance, even if they don't necessarily fit the full autistic demand avoidance profile. This is an area that needs a lot more research so that we can better understand it. But from what I understand, there are many ADHDers who find demands to be similarly triggering. Simply the fact that we are expected to do it makes us almost viscerally unable to do so. Now, demand avoidance can interfere with any stage of trying to accomplish a task, but I think it's especially potent when we try to finish a task. And this is because we've already started. So now there's the added pressure of, well, you started it, aren't you gonna finish it? In some cases, it might feel like it will be even more work not to finish the task, and so we feel like we have to finish it, and that makes it an even heavier demand. And all of this can lead to a really strong urge to avoid that demand. So how do we cope? How do we cope with confused expectations, tons of overwhelm, and demand avoidance in order to actually get our shit done? Let's start with expectations. So shifting expectations is always hard, especially when you have ADHD, because we tend to have memory issues. So even if you go through all the mindset work of saying, you know, the end of a task is its own thing and it really involves multiple steps. So I'm just gonna focus on accepting that and embracing that and expecting that. You're gonna forget you did all that mindset work. And then the next time you have to finish a task, you're gonna expect it to take one or two steps again. Now, this obviously isn't the case for everyone. Not every ADHDer has memory issues, and even those of us who do may experience their memory issues differently. But this is something that I've come across again and again. I will do the mindset work on a complicated problem, on something that my ADHD is making difficult for me. I'll do that mindset work, I'll process it, I'll change my expectations, and then I forget all the work I put in. One way to counteract this is to have a written list of what it takes to finish tasks that you know are difficult for you. This is especially helpful for recurring tasks, so tasks you have to do again and again. So like for me, editing and putting up a YouTube video. In my head, once I film it, I'm like, oh, I'm basically done, which is like, if you've ever edited a YouTube video, is so far from the truth. So it can be really helpful for me to write out the exact steps that it takes in order to go from finished filming to actually scheduled. Now, this is sort of a tip that bridges the gap between expectations and overwhelm, and that is when you're writing out these steps for how to finish a task, don't write them all out, okay? Because that's gonna lead directly into roadblock number 2, which is overwhelm. If I were to finish filming this video and then immediately look at a list that had 20 more things I had to do, I would not feel proud of the work I had just done. I would just feel intimidated and overwhelmed by the work that was still left to do. And that's gonna lead me to not want to finish the task. Instead, I recommend writing out the next 5 steps. Do this throughout the whole process from start to finish, just the next 5 steps. This is all I have to do. And every time you cross off a step, write down what the next step you think is going to be after those 4 more that are listed there. That way you keep making steady progress and you've got a clear plan ahead of you without feeling like, oh my gosh, there's still so much work to do. Why am I even bothering? Finally, let's talk about demand avoidance. So there's a lot of tips and tricks out there for how to trick a demand avoidant brain into doing more demands, but I'm gonna offer you something a little bit different. And that is how to actually do less. Decreasing your demands is so good for a demand avoidant brain. It's hard to feel like you're always battling your brain. It sucks to feel like if you didn't try so hard to be a good and productive human, you would just be like a garbage person. Sometimes we have to let our brain do what it does, and we have to accept that and embrace it. So here's what that looks like for me. Number 1 is sometimes I just do it badly. Now, this isn't always the case, but for a lot of things, getting it done badly is better than not doing it at all. Even if I wrap up the loose ends in a really sloppy way, that's better than leaving all those loose ends strewn about my house or my brain. Sometimes you just have to say, okay, I've got 5 minutes left of focus in me. I'm just going to finish this in the next 5 minutes, and however it is how it is. Now, like I said, this isn't always possible or recommended. For example, a couple weeks ago, I was really struggling with some paperwork, and you can't just phone in paperwork. It needs to be filled out correctly. So I used my second strategy, which is asking for help. When there's something in my business that I am really struggling with the demands of, and I'm just avoiding, I ask my virtual assistant to help me out. And when there's something at home that I'm avoiding, and it feels like such a demand on my time and energy and focus and brain, I ask my partner for help. Now, I recognize that I'm in a really privileged position to have a virtual assistant, to have a partner who is capable of helping me in the ways that I need help. I know not everybody is gonna be in that position, so I don't say this to bring up an option that you don't have access to make you feel bad. I say it so that you guys don't think I'm out here just starting, continuing, and finishing all my tasks all by myself all the time, because that's just not the case. Finally, tip number 3 for dealing with demand avoidance is just don't finish. Yeah. Sometimes that's actually okay. A very recent example of this for me is my brand new website, neurocuriosityclub.com. It is not done. And I know I'm gonna finish it eventually. I know that. And honestly, probably sooner rather than later. It just wasn't done by the deadline that I set. And it was 2 or 3 days before that deadline, and I knew I wasn't gonna finish. Not because there was too much on my plate, although there probably was, but because the demand to get it done in time I was avoiding it. I was being demand avoidant. And so about 2 days before the deadline, I just had the realization, oh, this isn't gonna get done. And that's okay. Thankfully, I used the tips in my previous 2 videos about how to start a task and how to continue through the messy middle of a task. So I managed to prioritize. So I got most of the more important things on the website done so that a lot of people visiting the site probably don't even realize it's not finished. Now, all of that being said, let's say there are certain areas of your life where you can't decrease demands. You have to do the thing and you have to do it relatively well. What are some of those tips and tricks I mentioned earlier about how to convince your demand avoidant brain to do the demands? Well, as I mentioned earlier, you don't want to use these all the time. Sometimes you have to let your brain do what your brain does, even if that means being demand avoidant. But I also understand that we live under capitalism and we need to eat, and you have to get shit done sometimes. So let's talk about how to make that happen. First up, I want you to envision the most complicated way you could finish this task. I want you to picture all the bells and whistles, the most intricate, complicated way that you could do the thing. Then once you've spent maybe 5 minutes just picturing that and feeling the demand of that, I want you to stop. And I want you to envision the simplest way you could finish this thing and finish it well. The comparison, the juxtaposition of the super complicated version with the simple version is gonna make the simple version feel like you are avoiding demands. Look at this huge complicated version you're not doing. You're avoiding 80 million demands over here by doing the simple version over here. Tip number 2 is ask someone who loves you to be the bad guy. This is one that you really have to work out with someone ahead of time, and you have to make sure it's okay with them. For me, this is my partner, my husband. He is comfortable doing this for me every now and again. He doesn't do it all the time because it's not super fun for either one of us, but it is necessary sometimes. So let me explain what this looks like. Basically, this comes up a lot for us with cleaning because I tend to be very demand avoidant around cleaning. But it needs done. I know it needs done. I just hate it and avoid it a lot. And I've tried considering my sensory needs, I've tried considering my executive functioning needs, and I really truly think it's just straight up demand avoidance at this point. So what we do, me and my husband, is on days that we know we have to clean, I tell him, hey, are you okay being the bad guy today? And he's always free to say yes or no. On days where he's like, no, the cleaning doesn't need done that badly. Like, I will do what I can do and you can do what you can do and we'll just let it go. But on other days, he'll be like, yeah, this needs done. I can be bad guy for today. And I'm like, okay, here we go. And he doesn't yell at me or make me do anything. It's not like that kind of bad guy, but he just puts the demand on me. And he says, Megan, I need you to clean bathrooms today. I need that done. Immediately my body says no, no. So I start to get frustrated almost immediately. And he's like, I know you don't like it. I understand. And he tries so hard to be so comforting even while he's being the bad guy. But he's like, you know, it has to happen today. We haven't done it in weeks. It needs done. And I usually say something snarky at this point, like, okay, well, do you need it done right now? As if he's the one who needs it done, when in reality, it's our house. Like, I need to clean it just as much as he needs to clean it. But already the demand avoidance is kicking in and I'm frustrated and I'm starting to get angry. And he sort of takes a deep breath and he's like, yes, it needs to happen now or within the next hour. Sometimes he gives me like a time frame because sometimes that's easier for me. Although sometimes that just means I delay until the last 5 minutes until the hour's up. But then I go huffily clean the bathroom and honestly, I'm not even frustrated. A lot of times I'm straight up angry. Like, I'm really angry with him for making me do something that I just don't want to do. And I know that sounds very childish, but if you are demand avoidant, you will know what I'm talking about here. Sometimes I just need my husband to be the bad guy and make me do whatever needs done. He always does so gently. He always does so with love. I understand that it's my demand avoidance that is largely the problem in this situation. Not that I'm a problem or my brain's a problem, just that sometimes the way my brain works is not super helpful. So this is something you want to have a conversation beforehand and during and after and make sure the relationship is okay, because you never want to put your partner in a position of having to be your parent, but every now and again, you just need someone to be the bad guy for you, or at least I do. Finally, tip number 3 is to give yourself rewards as you do the thing. Please remember that the ADHD reward system in the brain does not work the same way as a non-ADHD reward system in a non-ADHD brain. Non-ADHDers can sometimes say, okay, when the task is done, I get this treat and it's going to be so nice. And then they finish the task and then they get the treat and they get the dopamine, they feel rewarded. ADHD brains don't typically work that way. The longer we put off our reward, the less dopamine we actually get. So instead, we just need rewarded while we do it. This can look like all kinds of things. For me, when I'm cleaning the bathroom and I'm mad, I listen to a podcast or to like vibey music. Usually it's musicals for me, but it can be whatever works for you. Some people like to reward themselves with like a gummy bear for every paragraph they read when they're studying. The point is you want it to be a continual reward rather than one big reward at the end. If these tips were helpful for you, or if you just enjoy my teaching style, I would love to see you at my totally free upcoming event, March 11th through the 13th, called Housework, Hygiene, and Hobbies. This is a completely free 3-day training where each day we're gonna talk about one of the 3 biggest areas that I notice people tend to struggle with executive functioning, which is housework, hygiene, and hobbies. The link to get your free ticket is in the description below, and if you're seeing this after March 13th, please do not panic. You can get the pre-recorded version of these trainings below. Just look under the free resources that might help you header. Finally, if you've been lurking on my page for a little while and you know you're probably ready to hire me as your coach, especially when it comes to executive functioning, I really encourage you to check out my Get Shit Done program. This is a lifetime access program, meaning that you get access to the program as long as it exists. And the program includes video lessons, weekly live group coaching sessions, and tons of amazing bonuses. Additionally, equitable pricing is now available. And with that, we have come to an end of our How to Get Stuff Done with ADHD series. Did you learn something about how to actually work with your brain and not against it? If so, let me know in the comments below, and I will see you all on Saturday.